Welcome to Real Talk Christian Podcast, where we drink coffee and have real conversations on faith, culture, and society. This is Marc, Hyde.
And Chris Fuller.
And today on Real Talk Christian Podcast, we are talking about rhythms for the new year. We're going to look back on 2022 and talk about what rhythms of life we can put into our lives to have a better 2023 as Christians. You ready to talk about it, Fuller?
We're Real Talk, and we're gonna go to 2023.
So you ready? You ready?
Let's go.
Let's go! Oh, I caught you laughing. Caught you laughing at your own Auld Lang Syne stuff, man.
Oh, no, that's not what I was laughing at.
Oh, okay. It's the bubbly.
We're not going to bring that up.
It's the bubbly. But so that was you just pulled a Chris Fuller edition of Auld Lang Syne.
That was the most awkward transition.
That was a very awkward transition. But we're here.
Yeah.
We made it to the end of 2022. Back in 2019, back in 2020, we didn't know if we were going to make it.
We didn't know.
Like, the podcast and life.
When COVID hit, it was like,
we're done.
Man.
The world's done.
Yeah.
But since COVID, I found me a wife.
Yeah, you did.
Got me a lot more kids.
Yeah, you did.
We became even more best friends. We drink a lot of coffee.
Yeah, we did. I'm drinking tea right now.
RTC has exploded. We don't know what's happening, but we are here for it, man.
We're down with this clown.
What?
We're down with the clown.
I don't know that one.
You're not down with
my
the
brain
clown?
is too fried to talk about it. Not because of 420, because it's been a long work week.
It's like not
because of that. You've had a long work week too, though,
I
man.
have.
You've been rock. Like, what do you guys call it? Downturns?
Yeah, downturns. So where we have our line is down for major maintenance activities. So
working 14-hour days and just grinding at both gears. And
and then I took today off, and I'm like, all right, I'm taking today off to do housework, and then
which is so fun and so exciting.
Yeah, so it's an awkward time for podcasting for both of us.
It definitely is,
to say the least.
Yeah, it's been a busy week for me, and then I'm staring down the barrel of way too many projects for me to stay afloat, and jury duty now. So
good old jury duty.
You know, I've been summoned to jury duty 3 times in the last 8 months.
You keep saying jury duty over and over again. It makes me think of Wreck-It Ralph when she's like, you said duty.
I've always wanted to do jury duty. I got my first jury duty summons when I was in college, and so obviously I couldn't do that.
Sure.
I didn't hear anything forever, and then I got jury summons in 2015, and then it was one of those you call and they're like, oh, it got canceled. And so you have to show up tomorrow. And so I didn't show up. And then I got summoned again, but then I was gone. And then another one, I'm like, yeah, so
I got summoned one time.
There was something that was going, we were gone or something like that again. And then I got an email summons saying, hey, you're supposed to report in a week. And I said, excuse me?
Huh.
I did not get I don't even know what my ID is. I don't know nothing. So I had to call the bailiff, and they were like, yeah, just don't worry about it. Can we put you back in the pool? I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. A week later, here's your summons.
I got summoned one time, and it's right when I was moving to Florida. And I'm like, I'm moving. They're like, yeah, you need to be here next week. And I'm like, I'm going to be living in Florida at the time. They're like, oh.
And they thought it was just made up excuse. Like, no, bro, I'm moving to Florida.
Yeah, no, I was gone. So, yeah, I've never been summoned since.
So I've always wanted to, and I'm really excited about the idea, but I'm not excited about the fact that I'm a solopreneur. And if I don't work, I don't eat.
See, I always have this this mythical dream of what it would be like to be involved. Yeah,
because we watched NCIS and Criminal Minds and Bowl and all these different things.
That's not why. 12 Angry Men. That's why.
What's 12 Angry Men?
Well, you got to be a little bit of a boomer to know what 12 Angry Men.
Okay, boomer. So tell me about 12 Angry Men, because I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's 12 men.
That are angry?
That are angry. No, it's about a murder trial, and it's basically the jurors inside the jury room. The whole thing is like you're at the end of the closing arguments, and then they're going to deliberate, and it's them in the room deliberating, and there's one guy, and he's like, no, I think this guy's innocent. Everybody else saying guilty, so it's 11-on-1, and it's the whole story progresses, and they re-examine all the evidence. It finds out that the one guy was right. The guy was not guilty, and except for one juror still was holding to the stance of no, he was guilty,
and he was the one who did it.
And come to find out, that would have
been an interesting
that
story
guy
plot.
knew the guy that was and didn't like the guy that was on trial, but he lied about it. And so once they did that, it was mistrial. But it was called 12 Angry Men. It's a classic. The first time I had to watch it, I was in Literature 101 in college. And they're
Literature 101?
So we had to, we were going to read a book. So we had to read the book 12 Angry Men, and then we watched the film, and then we had to write a paper on it. So I think it was with Henry.
Was it the black and white version?
Yes.
From 1957.
Yes. Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Whoa, but dude, this has which I have never seen this. Rotten Tomatoes has it at 100.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal movie.
Metacritic is 96.
Phenomenal
IMDb
movie.
is 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
Like, you don't see those stats,
It's
man.
got Henry Fonda in it, doesn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, Henry Fonda. He's
that?
the main character.
Who's Henry Fonda?
He was a well-known actor in the 50s. Like, he was your Chris Pratt. He was your, except for not so funny. I guess he's like your...
He's everywhere.
Yeah, he was in all the 40s and 50s movies. He's a big name, big, huge actor back then.
Huh.
Yeah. So.
That's very interesting. I did not know. I'm looking up. That's really fascinating.
Fun fact with Chris Fuller.
Yeah, so needless to say, I mean, by the time this episode's done, I mean, let's just be honest, I'd be long done from jury duty.
The jury duty will be over
Check in
for
with me
months.
to see about my emotional status after Monday at 5 o'clock when jury duty is all done.
Maybe you'll be an angry man.
I might be.
Anyways, so I think to end the year, we should play Would You Rather real fast.
Oh, okay. We have not done Would You Rather. And for those who are new to the
time.
podcast, well, goodness, man, what, 2 years ago?
Yeah, something like that.
Because we were always telling people, hey, let us know about you, and we'd ask questions.
Yeah, and you came up with the idea.
And we were
You're
like, let's just talk about it, man. Let's let people get to know us a little bit. Because if we're calling you out to, hey, introduce yourself and chat about yourself or whatever, you got to get to know us a little bit, too.
Right, exactly. All right, so would you rather own your own boat or own your own plane?
Adult answer is really hard because I'm doing the ROI on both right now, but I think I'd rather own my own plane. I think I'd rather own my own plane.
I owned my own boat and I sold my own boat, and now I would want to own a plane as well. So 74% say own a plane, 26% say.
But you owned a good solid fishing boat. When I think the difference between a plane and a boat, I think a better question would be: would you rather own your own plane or rather have a yacht? I think that would be a more fair question.
No, because you can get planes for like $15,000.
Oh yeah, like little biplanes or whatever.
No, a little Cessna 150 or whatever, single wing or a fixed wing. Overhead wing, single engine. I mean, they're pretty reasonably priced.
Yeah, so 74% they'll agree with us. So they would rather have their own plane.
Sure.
Okay.
All right. So would you rather be with someone who's always really late, which is you, or with someone who's always really early?
I would rather be someone who's always really early.
Yeah, me too. 81% agree.
Which is hilarious because most people are not the person who's really early. No, just late.
I hate being late.
It's like when people show up to church. Sorry, guys, the traffic was hard. The traffic in the Starbucks line. That's why you late.
There's so many times we go to church and Janelle's like, we're so early. And I'm like, well, we're just going to sit in the car for 15 minutes because Sunday school's still going on. So
it is a little awkward sometimes, but like at least, at New Life, because the other day we got to church early. Like,
well, yeah, because you guys live like 30 seconds down the road.
Yeah, that doesn't change anything. It just means we got to sleep in a little bit more.
Right.
But, we walked in at like 7-8 minutes until it was like go time, and I sat down with the older two girls. I'm just like, I don't know what to do, because normally we walk in, it's like first song is already happening.
Wow!
And by the time we check and get the kids dropped off,
if
all
you
the
didn't
different
sleep
things.
in and you got up at normal time, then you'd be ready to be and always be there before.
That's true, but at least I'm awake and ready to worship Jesus.
There you go. That's true. All right. So would you rather never be able to watch Netflix again or never be able to watch YouTube again? Netflix.
I would rather watch YouTube. So never watch Netflix. Yeah, no, I don't need Netflix.
So I haven't had Netflix in like 3 years.
Except for the fact that The Crown's about to drop season 5, and
I haven't.
Stuff's gonna go down.
So when they did the whole like Jesus whatever and like had him as like a
that didn't go anywhere.
Homo or whatever.
I remember that. Don't worry about that.
Right before they dropped that, I canceled Netflix. I was like, no, I don't want no part of this. So 70% say cancel Netflix. 30% say
because here's the deal. I would never be able to fix my car again if I don't have YouTube.
YouTube is the best tutorial.
I wouldn't even be able to do my job if I don't have YouTube.
Right? So would you rather have dinner with the president or have dinner with your favorite celebrity, which is what, Chris Pratt?
No. Favorite celebrity? But it's hard because you got musicians, you got actors, you got different people. I think it'd be really cool to have dinner with Tom Hanks.
Ooh,
I think I would
good.
love to have dinner with Tom Hanks.
That would be fun.
That'd be a lot of fun.
first question. What would be your first question to him? Mine would be, are you part of the Illuminati? First question right off the bat. You've been so successful. Something that's got to be going on.
I would say, do you actually enjoy what you get to do, or is it a job most days? You know, because like, and even like, I forgot who I was talking to about this. Oh, one of my clients, and we're talking about what he did for work and whatever. And I said, do you enjoy this? Like, do you actually enjoy this part? He goes, yeah, for the most part. I'm like, yeah, I enjoy most of my parts of work too. And I kind of gave him like a little funny look of like, this isn't the part that I enjoy, and we got a good laugh out of it, even though that's the part I enjoyed the most of just chatting with my clients. But
sure.
But yeah, there's always a piece of me where it's like, work is work. Like, you enjoy what you do. You generally, when you're doing it, you sometimes enjoy it, but there's a lot of hard parts about any job, no matter how great it is.
Not everybody enjoys their work, but
no.
okay.
No, but I mean, like, for anyone who even just loves their work, there's part about their works that they probably hate.
Yeah.
Like, if you ask me, Mark, what do you hate about your job? I can give you a list. But I enjoy what I do.
So you still haven't answered the question.
So that's what I would ask him. I would say, do you actually enjoy your job?
Okay.
Oh, celebrity.
or
No,
president?
I want to talk with Tom Hanks, bro.
All right. So 83% say celebrity.
That's interesting. All right, give us one more.
Well, it might be because of our president, but anyways.
No, I've said it's in general.
All right. So last one. All right. Get $1 for every good deed you do, or get $100 for every evil act you do.
Ooh, definitely good. I wouldn't want to do an evil. Like, that's rough.
I mean, that's a morality question right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to have to go with you. Let's do the good deed. 55% say good deed. 45% of y'all are just evil.
But
y'all just money hungry.
But over half the people said they would rather do a good thing for $1.
Yeah, but just slightly over half.
Just slightly over half. I mean, it's kind of like those jokes where it's like, you know, like those like TikTokers and Instagram and Facebook, they walk up with their phones like, would you punch your best friend or punch your dad for $100,000? Dude, I'd sucker punch anybody for $100,000 or $1 million. Like,
but $100, not enough.
Like, would you let your wife punch you for this? Yeah.
Yeah.
Get it good, Beth.
That would be different, right? If somebody's got to do something to me, I'd be like, yeah, bring it on.
There was we're just gonna go into it. There was one where it's like, would you punch your dad for $100,000? And the guy walks up and he throws dust in the air and punches the dust. Because like cremation, and I'm like, you just dead dad joke that, and that's very uncomfortable for a lot of people, but
it was good.
I thought it was funny.
All right,
I have a dead dad in case people aren't sure. My dad died when I was 10, so
stop talking about your dead dad.
It just be
way to bring down the show.
Let's not happy things.
Anyways, yeah, you know,
like meatloaf.
A lot of people are probably like, Chris, what the heck are you doing? I'm like, well, see, Mark jokes around about it all the time.
Yep.
And we have this relationship built to where I can do it.
Watching people squirm. I like watching people squirm for things that I think are funny. But, what is funny, though? So I was talking with Devin, thinking of just dead dad jokes, because I would do it to him, and now he punches back. It's really funny. So he made a joke the other day about our Facebook group. So I was just I was talking with him and Kathleen, and I was like, yeah, dude, like, RTC's like meatloaf is a thing with RTC, because I made some joke when they were there, like, yeah, let's have meatloaf. He goes, dude, why are you talking about meatloaf? I'm like, dude, it's a thing in the RTC world. And then
no. It's a thing in the Mark Hyde world that everybody is continuing it on with it because of Mark Hyde.
I don't think it's sympathy, though. I think it's legit. I think RTC is all about the meatloaf.
I think most people eat meatloaf from time to time, but you've made such a huge deal of meatloaf that it's elevated meatloaf in people's minds.
But like, so Garen posted in the Facebook group, he said, think about Mark Hyde dinner tonight, one guess. And I took the screenshot of that with some of the comments, people freaking out about meatloaf, and I said, I told you, Devin. And he goes, dude, that's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. So RTC, let's keep it weird.
That's because you have elevated it to it. Do you understand that?
Yeah, I know, and I'm here for it.
You understand?
I made it a thing.
Your actions have consequences.
Mm-hmm.
With great power comes great responsibility.
For meatloaf, dude.
Have you learned nothing from the Marvel Universe?
I did. With great power comes great responsibility. Beth has a great power of making amazing meatloaf.
I'm
and her
telling you,
responsibility is to make it really
I'm very
well,
scared for you right now, because you keep talking up this meatloaf, and nobody else has ever tried it, and I'm really scared that it's going to be terrible. And then I'm gonna have to be like,
you know,
dude,
that's actually Beth's biggest fear now.
You're gonna ruin.
Her biggest fear is that her meatloaf will not pass muster. But everyone who's ever had it has
your wife is gonna make you sleep outside, because people are gonna want to try the meatloaf, and they're gonna be like, it's terrible, and then she's gonna feel horrible, and it's all your fault.
That's true. I love you, babe. So what's another thing that we've made a thing on this show? Like, is there any other things that we made a thing? Like, we have like little like
bingo
phrases, like
we've got bingo.
But like, has there been any other things where we've drawn attention to it and now it's just a thing?
No, probably.
You
not.
know? Like, I don't know if there's any, I mean, I'm sure our listeners, maybe you guys would let us know what are things that we've turned into things. Let us know in the Facebook group. Because I'm like, Grass Fairy and.
Yeah, but see, again, that's just playing off of like, okay, you made this joke. You made that joke.
That was like first season,
Let's just like go along with the joke because it's funny. But it's not like, I don't think it's a thing.
But is there anything else that there's like a thing? Like,
I don't think it's
Meatloaf is a thing.
I don't even think Meatloaf is a thing.
There's like 5 people in our group that think it's a thing.
I think they just think it's funny. It's not that it's a thing. Right.
Well, maybe if everyone shows up at Revive a festival, maybe I can convince Beth to make it, which would be really hard to make it and bring it because then it'll get cold because we're a couple hours away.
And we're like, no, we're not. We're like 40 minutes away. It took us 40 minutes to get there.
That's right.
You put it in you heat up a crock pot, you put it in a crock pot in a warmer.
And then we went into the colon of Michigan, the magic capital of the world, and got some really good curly fries.
Oh,
Curly's?
Dude, Curly's so good.
We're going back next year, but you're not here talking about food.
You know what?
Oh, go ahead.
I don't know. Maybe we should go to Curly's and take a bite of Curly's food and then a bite of the meatloaf and compare it.
I mean, their burger wasn't that great, though.
Mine was phenomenal.
You had a wrap or whatever you had, a flatbread or something?
Yeah, I don't remember. Oh,
I don't know what you got, but I had it. It was a slam burger. It wasn't that great.
Mine was that chicken bacon ranch.
Yeah,
that's what it was.
It was a wrap.
Dynamite.
So
that
good.
Was dynamite. But those fries, dude.
Those fries were amazing.
Holy cow, they were amazing.
I'm gonna transition. You know what else is amazing?
What's
when
that?
people leave us reviews on Apple Podcasts and rate us on Spotify.
Look, we've been talking so long, your iPad shut off.
Oops.
That's a phenomenal thing.
Oh, I guess the pictures of the kids again. Okay, so let's pull it back up.
Why don't you go ahead and read this phenomenal, this just wonderful review that was left for us.
Cool. So this review was left back in July, 6 months ago.
We're still catching up,
which is good. We want to keep playing catch up. I mean, we're still playing catch up to some other podcasts that have like thousands of Apple Podcast reviews, but we'll get there.
140.
Look, one day at a time, baby. 600 on Spotify. We'll get there.
Help us out, people.
We'll get there. But so this was left on July 20th from Ren Warson, and it says, I found this podcast when I wanted to listen to other Christians and learn what other people were thinking about common questions people had about the Bible. Mark and Chris, you spelled my name right. Mark with a C.
That's because you say it a lot.
Yep. And I love when people like message us and go, hey, this is Eric with a C. And I'm like, bet. So Mark and Chris are 2 down-to-earth people who aren't afraid to talk about the gospel and how it affects all of our lives. So if you leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, we want to send a mini swag bag out to you. So leave a review after you hear the review read. Send us a message, text message, email, DM, courier pigeon, whatever you guys to do. Let us know where we can send you your mini swag bag.
Smoke signals.
And with us going into 2023, are we able to talk about what 2023 might hold, or should we hold off on that?
We should probably hold off.
All right, we'll hold off on that. Wait for surprises coming down the pike. But this year, this year has been a very wild year for both of us. It's involved, moves for me. It's involved just transitioning and shifting a lot of things in so many different regards. But maybe we should have had these questions be banter questions so we don't go too long into it. But just thinking about the last year, all right? So let's reflect on the last year a little bit.
Okay.
So what has been your favorite memory from this past year? Family, work, faith, whatever. What's been some of your, maybe a couple, what have been some of your favorite memories from the last year?
So even though it was not the funnest trip to the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter because the kids were being ornery, there were some definite special moments during that time when the kids were being good. Like we went to this place called Aurora's Diner, and they were just
Aurora's Diner.
So Piper's middle name is Aurora.
Right. Yep.
So I ended up buying them shirts, all 3 girls, my wife and the 2 girls, shirts from Aurora's Diner. But it was just kind of cool to go to this nostalgic diner. It was like an old school diner with everything was old. And great food, but just had a good moment there with my kids and with my family, and just reflecting on, how good God is, right, and giving me a family even through the hard times. They're still such a blessing to my life.
Now, has there been one regard church life that you think would be one that stood out to you?
Church life, yeah. I mean, there's definitely some memories. I wouldn't say I have favorite memories of church life. I think all memories are pretty special. Between times I've had with Pastor Scott and Brandon, and with our small group, I can't pick out this is my favorite point in time. It's just they've all been kind of good memories to me.
That's cool.
Some rough memories too, but some good memories.
But that's life, man. There's
Sure.
mountain peaks and then there's valleys.
Sure.
So for me, when I'm thinking through it, I think one of my favorite memories probably was when Beth and I went to the Ben Rector concert down in Indianapolis. Not just because the concert was a whole lot of fun. It was actually my first non-Christian music festival concert, actually, because that's pretty much all I've ever been to was just festivals. So it was like my first concert with a ton of people in an amphitheater. And it was a whole lot of fun just hanging out with Beth that night. But what made it really, really fun is she planned out the whole weekend, and all I had to do was show up. No stress, no planning.
Yeah, I think I
just showed up.
You talked about that on a previous episode.
Yeah, so cause she planned out, like we went to, Quill's Coffee Shop, which I absolutely love Quill's. We went to the zoo, which zoos are one of my favorite things to do. And we just hung out in Indianapolis. It was just a really, really cool spot. I think what made it really fun was I didn't have to stress about trying to make sure everyone was having a good time, or I planned this with Beth. Are you sure you're having a good time? It was just she planned a weekend around, because she's amazing, all of my favorite things. Her, music, the zoo, and coffee. So it was a good time.
Cool.
That's probably my favorite memory. Besides, I love memories with the kids at the zoo. You'll hear animals a lot. Like taking the kids to the zoo, like those memories, even though they're just like the South Bend Potawatomi Zoo.
Sure.
Those are my favorite. That's my favorite place in the whole city besides the grotto. Love the zoo, love taking the kids there, but I also love taking the kids like to Shed Aquarium or the Indianapolis Children's Museum. So I would say whenever we can go and do an experience with the kids is just a really fun memory. Just letting the kids be the kids and just enjoying them in that.
Nice.
That's what I say would probably be mine.
Cool.
So here's another one then for you then, okay? So where have you seen, whether in your own life or in your families or whatever, where have you seen, the best way I can describe it is God showing up in your life and seeing God move this past year?
I would say, God's always moving in my life. But more so, I've noticed God moving in this podcast and Real Talk Christian podcast, and just connections we've made and opportunities we've had that, again, 2019, we would have never thought.
Never thought, man.
Never thought.
Hearing about people getting baptized because of this, joining our local church.
Seeing baptisms of listeners, getting to experience that with them. Some of the conversations we've had in the Facebook group, email, text, the socials, being at Engedi or Revive Fest, being able to be a part of that. That was so much fun. And just like, I don't know, it's just been so cool. It's been a cool ride that I never thought would actually happen. Like, I thought literally
we were
when
just two dudes on a mic having a good time by ourselves.
Well, when we started this podcast, I'm like, okay, this is probably going to be like the youth of our church is going to listen. That's like Jagger and Eli and all them guys. And that's where I thought it was going to go. Maybe, I figured my wife would, Jenny would listen, and at the time you weren't married. So, but I figured, a couple people a couple people I know, they might listen. Brandon, I was like, Brandon might listen to a couple of them here or there. But never did I ever think that we'd be like 25,000 downloads every month, and being asked to come
literally all over the world.
And being asked to come to a music festival, to just have conversations about faith, culture, and society, to be able to lead a chapel there, to be able to talk with people in Australia. Africa, wherever. We've talked to so many people from around the world, and it's just like we wouldn't have never had that had it not been for God.
That's cool.
Yeah. So that's what I would think about.
I would say the biggest thing where I've seen God move this past year, I think this has probably been the first year that I haven't really grieved not being a pastor as much, to be honest with you. I think I've transitioned to the point where, I miss teaching. Sure. I miss ministry. I miss a lot of the different things. Like, I just had lunch with Nathaniel this past week and was able to catch up, and that was really, really cool. And just being able to see, a kid who's still came through my whole ministry, his whole career,
sure, and
still, is trying to live for God and still trying to just be a solid person. It's cool. But this is, I'd say, the first year where I'm like, you know what, this is where God has me right now. This is where God wants us to be. I'm supposed to take care of my wife. I'm supposed to take care of my kids. We got the podcast that's going on. We found a new church to call home, right, which was, I thought, I never ever planned on ever leaving Southside till the day I die. And now I found a church where it's like we're the Hydes and we're plugged in, we're connected with the community. And because of that, I would say this is where I've seen God start to show up in even the kids' lives too, where, the oldest Ava, she's starting to talk about what does it mean to follow Jesus. And she's claim to profess, salvation and following Jesus, but we're still, working on training and equipping in that way. And Sadie's starting to ask questions about what baptism is and why do we do communion? Because I actually let my whole family take communion together, but other people don't with their kids. And especially like other traditions, because at a different church, they said, they were flat out, they said, if you're not a believer, whether you're a kid, you don't take this. And they're like, so why? So they're asking good questions and trying to seek to understand what does it mean to follow Jesus. And Elliot now is starting to ask questions and say, he when you ask him, he'll say, oh, I prayed to Jesus, because not pray, but I prayed to Jesus, because in the podcast he listens to every single night, he listens to God's big story from the Village Church in Texas, and he said, "Yeah, I prayed to God because I want to follow Him." So we've been having a ton of conversations around what does it mean to be adopted into God's family, and trying to have these different conversations just as we go to school, as we come back, which we'll talk about here a little bit later in the episode. But I would say where I've seen God move the past is watching God move in the world that I'm living in around me. And just having to open my eyes and recognize that God's doing all these things. Sure. So rather than focus on just me, myself, and my own faith, I can open up a little bit and see the faith of my family and see that, no, I still have a role to play in all this.
Sure.
So that's where I'd say I'd see God move the most this past year, is within both my eyes to see what's around me, but also just in my family itself.
Gotcha. Cool.
So last question, and then we'll jump into the actual conversation. And I hope you guys, listeners, are thinking about these questions as well. But the last one is where have you struggled the most with your faith this past year?
That's a difficult one, right? Because there's a lot of times where we may struggle from day to day.
Which we do.
From day to day. And, there's, like you said, the mountain peaks and the valleys. The struggle with most in the faith in the past year. I would just have to, I guess the most thing I've struggled with is not so much my own faith, but just hurting watching other people have to go through stuff. And just not questioning God of why, because I kind of know like God's in control, and I just believe and have trust and faith in Him about what's going on, but just wishing I could do more to help those people in those situations. I know that's not really a struggle, but it is kind of a struggle for me, right?
But it struggles with your faith that you just want to see it okay.
Well, right? It's not so much struggles with my faith as much as it is struggles within myself of not knowing what to do to help these people. That's kind of where I'm at. But
that's not an answer I was expecting. That's actually pretty cool.
But as far as like my personal faith, like it's like we talked about a couple of weeks ago of even in those times where I don't feel connected, it's not always about feeling, right? I can't trust my feeling and feeling connected. I just have to trust and continue with my unwavering faith in God. In those times that I may feel like He's distant, even though He's not distant, I just feel that way, and that's why you can't trust feelings, because the heart's deceitfully wicked, and who can know it? So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I would say for me, the biggest one is, and this is one I've always struggled with, but I would say being content with my day-to-day walk based on just the knowledge that I have about God, about the Bible, about things. Because there's, it's a book that I've studied and I've taught for years, including on the podcast. And it's when kids ask the big questions, I'm ready to, lock and load and let's answer these questions. But how much of that is me just answering their questions versus living and dwelling on it daily, So
you're saying,
I would say don't lean in your own understanding, but all your ways acknowledge Him.
You're struggling more with the relational part.
Yeah, I would say that. So I would say it's more of a confession of, because God wants a relationship with us. He's our Abba Father, and we're brought into the family of God, and we're the sons and daughters of God.
Right.
But the true gospel, what's the word I'm looking for? The true gospel of restoration and repentance and coming into the understanding realization of no, I'm a dirty, rotten sinner who, God, I just need your grace every single day. Rather than thinking through it that way, it's more of I can trust and lean into my knowledge of God and how it works and my theology and church history and philosophy and all these different things. And so I would say that where I struggled the most is, having that intentional relationship with God rather than just having more knowledge about God.
So let me
if
try
that
to
makes sense.
Let me try to just paraphrase to make sure I'm understanding.
Yeah.
I guess. So you're saying that you have a lot of knowledge in Scripture, but the practice of it, the actual the relational side of it, is lacking. Is that? Am I understanding that right?
I would say so.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand.
In my entire life, I've always struggled with, reading my Bible and praying and trying to keep my mind focused on the things of God. Because I'm very much it is what it is, natural consequences, natural this, natural that, to the point where, my daughter asked me a question. So, Dad, what was the last miracle you've seen? And I couldn't answer. I just flat out couldn't answer.
I can.
I mean, I could with Beth and looking back at all these different things, but in that moment,
Sure.
I was literally dumbstruck because I'm I don't live thinking of miracles because it's so easy. The people talk about science and faith where it's you can lean to, the doctors understand this, or I just had to keep working a little bit harder, and then these bills came, and not bills, but these opportunities came and showed up, and I've made some really cool partnerships and work. But, that's not God showing up. That's just me grinding every single day and doing the right things to be rewarded in that, rather than having the mindset of no. God is the one who brought me the opportunity to do this, and thankfully he's given me the grace to be able to do it so far. But then I also lean into, faithful in little, faithful in much. So is this just a rebuild thing?
It goes beyond that. You can go even more basic than that. Every breath you take is a miracle, because God does not have to give that to you.
Right. And that's where I've always struggled in my mindset. And that's just, I guess, this is more confession.
Yeah. Because right. Yeah. I mean, I struggle sometimes, I guess I would say, with that, of just lots of head knowledge and less relational. Not so much this year, but in previous years, past years, especially when we first started the podcast, 2019 was a big year. That it wasn't until 2020 that the relational side started coming back. But 2019, I can remember back of, I have all this head knowledge, but that relationship,
because we're reading,
right?
And we're studying.
We love knowledge, right? We like to study these things. This is something that piques our interest, and we love facts, and we like working things out. And so,
and I can't think of the verse that we talked about it recently, but the Bible it does talk about adding to your faith knowledge, so you need to do that, but that shouldn't stop there.
But your faith is not, your knowledge is not required to have faith.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we have to, I think you and I are both of the same personality with that, where we have to refocus, right? Because I think about the focus series we had.
Conversations we've had. Yeah, that was about a year, 2 years ago.
Yeah, something like that. But we have to refocus because knowledge will not save us, right? You could be the best scholar of biblical literacy, inerrancy, all this stuff, but without that relationship, it means nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You could be the most well-spoken, the best preacher, the best teacher, the best pastor, the most loving person, but without Christ, it means nothing, right? So I'm preaching to myself here. It's a good reminder and a refocus point.
And that's why I wanted to talk about today's conversation with talking about rhythms of life. Because, over the last many years in RTC, we've had New Year's episodes where we've done just what we've done so far, just reflect on the past. We've done other ones where we're like, okay, should Christians have resolutions? What type of resolutions should we have? And I love that episode because you leaned into less about, here's all the goals you should have personally. It's no. Here's the types of things we should do as Christians to strive for. I remember that episode. We did the one where it's what's your word of the year?
Yeah, I love that
and
one.
mine was abide.
Yeah.
2 years ago.
Well, and you had one, the year before that was be still.
Be still. Be still and
be
know.
Still. That's when everything was kind of chaotic going for you. So
yep. And this year, this is where that came from. And so this year, my word for the year is rhythm. Rhythms. Okay. And the reason where this came up was I was sitting in church a couple weeks ago, and Beth was down visiting her sister in Kentucky, and I went to early service. I went to all people service at our church is what we call it. So we got family worship, which is lights are dimmer, music's a little louder, the drums are a little louder. And it's more what you would think of the modern worship, and then the other one,
bougie church.
No, not bougie, more of just passionate, I guess. I don't know, but so I went to the 9 o'clock service because I'm like, you know what? If this is supposed to be all part of the body, all part of the church, I want to see who's at the service. Let's just go and be there. Mm-hmm. And so it was really cool. I actually threw off Pastor Michael and Jake because they were like, "What, bro? What are you doing here?" And I sat in my same area, same spot. And he's like, you're a 10:30 anchor, bro. What are you doing up here right now? But during that service, it was really a unique perspective that Pastor Michael was talking about, because in that service, the whole series that we're going through is called Transform, and how to transform your mind, transform your heart, your living, all these different things that the Bible talks about, what we need to be transformed into. But a couple weeks ago, he was talking about rhythms of life and how creating rhythms of life, rhythms in your life can transform you. So, because by the time you get to the end of something, rhythms become habits, and habits become, just things that you just do. When you look back, all of a sudden, when you put certain rhythms in your life, you look back over the course of a year, and all of a sudden you go, whoa, I've come a long way. And rather than, trying to lean in hard into just do this as a Christian, like always read your Bible. And if you don't read your Bible, you failed that day, and always pray. If you don't pray, he goes, no. We just need to create rhythms of intentionality. That was what he was kind of talking about. So I've been dwelling on and meditating on this word rhythms for a while, and it sparked again the other night because Beth and I are binging The Chosen right now. We finally got into The Chosen series
about
years
time.
later. So we just got into season 2, actually. But so something that I was watching them do is they were focusing really hard on Shabbat and or Sabbath and what that means. And then they were also doing these other little things that I'm like, what is that? What is that? Because like every single time when they walk through a doorpost, they touch something, or they kiss their hand and touch something on the door.
Which they still do today.
And they still do. So I'm like, what is going on with all these different things? And so, and then the more I started looking into it, the more I was like, the Jewish culture was a very rhythmic culture, but it was rhythmic in order to remember God.
Right.
And to keep God first in all of your
remember
thoughts.
his promises.
And remember his promises,
remember what he's done
and his
for
works,
right.
and his
Yep.
his character and his nature and all these different things.
Yep.
And so I was like, you know what? Let's look back in this episode because, obviously Christianity stems from Judaism because we follow Jesus of Nazareth, a Jew. And so where did they get their rhythms from and why it's important? And maybe taking that into today's world of, are there rhythms that we can put into our life right now? So rather than trying to, the classic New Year's resolution of, I'm going to read the whole Bible all the way through in 1 year. And
quicker
then,
if you listen to it.
It's true. Or people who I remember my Bible every day, and then the first week's really good, and then by 3 months you're back in the same old rhythm, but now you're feeling guilty and depressed and whatever. I'm like, is there things that we can do like what the Jews did to put rhythms into our lives where it's not a forced thing, but it's just a natural response of life that we do out of this?
Okay.
So when we look at the various rhythms of what the Jewish culture did, they had different rhythms at different parts of life, both yearly and daily and monthly. And so when we look at Jewish culture, they were extremely intentional, though, about keeping God in the forefront of their minds no matter what. The whole goal was to keep Adonai, keep Yahweh, keep God in front of their hearts and minds 24/7. And so there was Jewish rhythms, though, to remember what God did throughout history, to remember the works of God. Like, Passover, for example, is probably the most popular one that people know about today because Jesus was crucified on Passover. And then also just with the 10 Commandments, one of the first stories you probably learned as a kid, the very last day when the angel of the Lord passed over the houses of Egypt, if you had blood on your doorpost from the sacrificial lamb,
right,
it was passed over, and this was part of you actually being saved from Exodus. And so I got all this information from a website. It was about Jewish festivals is really what this whole website is about. It was actually really cool. And it talked about what the upcoming events are in the Jewish holidays. So a lot of this is going to be quotes taken from them, just so you know. So, so in Passover, just in case you didn't know, the exodus of the Jews from Egypt is celebrated with an 8-day festival of Passover, ridding the home ridding the home of leavened bread, which was Chametz. So they got rid of leavened bread, and they ate only unleavened bread or unleavened items, commemorate the haste in which the former slaves fled Egypt, leaving them too little time for their bread dough to rise. Man, I'm having a hard time reading this week. The Jews retell the story of the Exodus during the Passover Seder. So is that the season?
Yeah.
The Passover
it's
events.
like that. Yeah, the Passover time setters.
Yeah, and so Passover was literally for them to remember that God brought them out of Egypt and rescued them from that. And so they actually traditionally did certain things, not just to talk about it and remind it, but they actually changed their entire life for 8 days to remember Passover. And the reason why they do it is because in Deuteronomy 6:12, it says, be careful not to forget the Lord who brought you out of Egypt, that place of slavery. So that's what they have Passover for. Another one is Purim, which is the Festival of Lots, is what it's called, and it recalls the rescue of the Jews of ancient Persia from annihilation at the hands of Haman, who cast lots to choose this day for this plot to kill the Jews. Queen Esther, which Esther, from the book of the Bible, and
Or
her
from
uncle,
VeggieTales.
or from VeggieTales, it be what it be. And her uncle Mordecai foiled this plan. So on Purim, the book of Esther is read. It's called the Megillah.
The Megillah.
Is that like the scroll? Is that that's supposed to mean?
The Megillah of Esther is read.
So the scroll of
time.
Esther, the book of Esther is read, and the holiday is celebrated with festivity, costume, and noisemaker.
Hamat
Wow, man. These are some big Jewish words, and I'm glad you're here. So that's the traditional food, and then there were gift packages known as Mishloach Manat, or exchange, and money is also given to the poor. Each year, now, this is modern, the Women Philanthropy Program hosts a quote-unquote Pack a Bag of Love event to pack and deliver care packages to community members who are homebound or living in care facilities. So Purim was celebrated way back in the day, and it's still celebrated today in Jewish culture to remember what God did through Queen Esther. Another one is called, is it Shavuot?
I think it's Shavuot.
Shavuot?
I believe so, but it could be pronounced Shavat too.
So this holiday marks the end of the counting of the Omer. It recalls Moses' receiving of the Torah. The letter of Ruth is read, and an all-night Torah study is customary. Dairy food, honey, and floral decorations are traditional. So again, this is going back to the Torah. So far we've had festivals for when God, brought them out of slavery, when he saved them from the hands of the ancient Persians with Queen Esther, when the Torah was given, and then the Shakat, which is the Feast of Booths, which we see actually Jesus participating in John chapter 7. But this harvest festival is named for the temporary dwellings called a sukkot. Is that right? Sukkot, decorated with fruit and vegetables, set up to recall the booths in which the Jews lived during their journey from Egypt. This holiday is marked by processions with the lulav palm branches,
which is a palm branch with myrtle and willow.
Yep, and
etrog,
which is citron. I'm not really sure what that is.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that is either.
But again, this is a remembrance of that, what God did for them when they were just living in tents, traveling the wilderness.
Yeah.
Another one is called Simchat Torah, which outside of Israel, the day after Shemini Atzeret, Shemach Torah marks the end of the annual Torah reading and the beginning of the cycle for the next coming year. It is celebrated with singing, dancing, and merry processions of people carrying Torahs and children waving flags. And then the one that probably is most familiar today in culture is Hanukkah. And in 167 BC, the Maccabees, which are the Maccabeans, you can read about the Maccabean books, they led a band of Jews in a successful battle against the occupying Syrian Greeks who had desecrated the second temple's eternal light. Miraculously, one day's oil supply lasted 8 days until more could be found. The Chanukah?
Menorah.
I knew. The menorah. There you go. The Chanukah menorah is lit for 8 nights to celebrate that miracle. Among the many Hanukkah traditions, children play dreidel, dreidel, I made it out of clay.
Yep.
Right, that one?
Yep.
And foods fried in oil are customary.
So funny thing with the Greeks who desecrated the second temple, they actually slaughtered a pig over the altar, because that was That's why that's what caused the Maccabean uprising, because of that. Had they not done that, some scholars say they wonder if it was just would have kind of just rebuilt later on, like some of the other conquerings were. But the Maccabeans, actually, because they desecrated the temple in that way, there was actually thought that maybe he was the first Antichrist type of thing. What is it called? Son of Perdition. Son of Perdition. So yeah.
Yes, yeah. So then, the crazy thing about what we talk about, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These 6 feasts that happen every single year aren't even half of what the Jews celebrate feast-wise.
No, and just thinking about Jesus probably celebrated all of these feasts, being that he was Jewish.
And so these are feasts, and these are rhythms that they put into their everyday life in order to remember what God did for the past, so they can remember what God can do in the future. But the Jews also had physical reminders as well to remind them of what God did. The most famous one being the 12 stones on the other side of the Jordan. That's where the band 12 stones we joked about on. But in Joshua 4, 1 through 8, it says, after the entire nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord spoke to Joshua. Choose 12 men from the people, one from each tribe, and command them, take 12 stones from this place in the middle of the Jordan where the priests are standing, which, because the Jordan was separated, carry them with you and set them down at the place where you will spend the night. So Joshua summoned the 12 men that he had selected from the Israelites, one man for each tribe. And he said to them, go across to the ark of the Lord your God in the middle of the Jordan. Each one of you lift up a stone onto his shoulder, one for each of the Israelite tribes, so that this will be a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask you, what do these stones mean to you? You should tell them, the water of Jordan was cut off in front of the ark of the Lord's covenant. When it crossed the Jordan's water was cut off. Therefore, these stones will always be a memorial for the Israelites. And the Israelites did just as Joshua had commanded them. So the physical reminder here is the fact of God did this to bring them into the promised land. And it was a physical reminder that they put in front of themselves. And they said, hey, when your children ask about this, you should tell them this. And this, I was trying to figure out where exactly to put this, but I put the Sabbath into this as well as a physical reminder of what, who God is and what God has done as well. Because what the Sabbath was a weekly, which I thought this was interesting, 25-hour observance.
Yep.
From just before sundown each Friday through the completion of nightfall on Saturday. Shabbat, which is another word for Sabbath, is more than just a day off from labor. It is a day of physical and spiritual delights that is meant to illuminate certain key concepts in the traditional Jewish perception of the world. Shabbat is portrayed in the Bible as the pinnacle of creation of the universe, and its observance can be seen as a reminder of the purposefulness of the world and the role of human beings in it. Shabbat also serves as a memorial to God's act of rescuing the Israelites from slavery in Egypt by setting aside a day for personal autonomy and freedom from the harsh demands of labor. The traditional Shabbat is portrayed in Jewish liturgy, songs, and story as a day of joy, a sanctuary from work or its travails, and even a foretaste of the perfected world that will someday be attained.
So funny enough, they actually have a Shabbat manual that came out in the 1957, I think it was. I've got it in one of those bookcases.
Do you really?
The Shabbat manual. It's like a 67-page manual of exactly all the prayers, songs, and exactly how you observe Shabbat every week.
And what's interesting is I didn't know how they did Shabbat until I watched The Chosen, which is what spurred some of this conversation.
And that's just a little taste of what they do on. I mean, Shabbat is a huge deal. So much so they made a manual and they go, here is how you observe Shabbat,
which is fascinating,
but
it's all done intentionally, not just to make sure. It wasn't about the rhythm, it wasn't about the rules of you have to do this. It's more the fact of we do this because we want to remember God and the works of God. So far, the Jewish people have had yearly rhythms that they have in their lives of festivals to remember God. They have, actual physical things to remind of it, including like the weekly Shabbat. But they also had instructions to be remembered of God's works every single day.
Right.
Which they get from the Shema. You see that they were supposed to have verses on the doorpost, which this is what what they had in The Chosen. When they walked out, they would kiss and then they would touch it as they would go through. And it was also that they're supposed to have verses on their own head. And then they were to instruct their sons and daughters about the works of God. So I actually brought the Shema here with me today.
Go for it.
So we're going to read it. So this is the Shema. So it says, listen, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. These words, what I'm giving you today, are to be in your heart. Repeat them to your children. Talk about them when you sit in your house and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as on your hands and let them be a symbol on your forehead. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your city gates. And this is in quotes, when the Lord your God brings you into the land he swore to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that he will give you a land with large and beautiful cities that you did not build, houses full of everything that you did not fill them with, cisterns that which you did not dig, and vineyards and olive groves that you didn't plant. And when you eat and are satisfied, be careful not to forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. Fear the Lord your God. Worship him and take and take your oaths in his name. Do not follow other gods, the gods of the people around you, for the Lord your God, who is among you, is a jealous God. Otherwise, the Lord your God will become angry with you and obliterate you from the face of the earth. Do not test the Lord your God as you tested him at Massa. Carefully observe the commands of the Lord your God, the decrees and statutes he has commanded you. Do what is right and good in the Lord's sight, so that you may prosper, so that you may enter and possess the good land the Lord your God has sworn to give your ancestors by driving out all of your enemies before you, as the Lord has said.
Yeah.
So now, obviously, the Shema, that's not all the Shema. That's the Shema and then the stuff repeating after it. But basically, they're supposed to remember the works of the Lord, talk about it with their kids, repeat it as they go, put it on their doorpost so it's in front of their face, put it on your face.
So, and the traditional conservative Jewish, I forget what they're called exactly, people still do that today, the actual ones that are like the hardcore, like following the Judaic laws and stuff. They still
you see it in Jerusalem at the Wailing Wall.
Well, not just there, but they actually do. They roll up little scrolls and like wear them around their forehead. They have like little special bands that they hold it there.
And then they have something that wrapped around their wrist to signify certain things.
Yep.
And don't they have like
they've got scriptures on their doorpost for every door they go through, which they kiss their hand and touch the scriptures as they go through each doorpost. They still practice that today.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because, you know, when we grow, I mean, I'm going to transition a little bit, you know, growing up for us as being part of the Baptist tradition, you know, we were always told like, oh, you're not supposed to do anything that will cause you to just say things in vain. So never do things that were repeated intentionally. And so it's like, that's part that's always been kind of confusing to me, where it's like, you know, we can never have the Lord's Supper every single week because then, it's important, it's just going to lose its meaning. Oh, we're not supposed to repeat this or that because, it's just going to lose its meaning.
It should point us the opposite direction and point us to Christ and to remembering him. So.
And so I want to transition into that.
Sure.
So, and this is where I want kind of us to think about going into 2023 with me, even thinking about the word rhythm. What rhythms should we put in our lives to remember what God has done for us and remember the goodness of God? Because the Jews had festivals, they had feasts, they had Shabbat, they had physical things they could see and actually remember. They actually named places after God, like Jacob's Well, and then these other different places they named them after God, of God who sees, God who hears, like Hagar in the wilderness. And then you also see them doing things in their own lives and in their house to never forget the goodness of God.
Right.
And I think in our culture in America, you know, we get so stinking sidetracked all the time that your boy included, we forget the goodness of God. We just talked about at the beginning of the episode. I forget who God is to me and how I should respond to that.
Yeah.
So I was trying to think, you know, about what different types of rhythms we should have in our lives and not be scared to create other rhythms where they might not be tradition for anybody else except for us. And that's okay, as long as it points back to the goodness of God. So I kind of just jotted down some things. I mean, this is just things that I just put down, dude. So I think it'd be cool just to walk through them.
Yeah, go for it,
You
man.
put some things, thoughts in if you think it's a different idea.
Sure.
And we just go on from there. But I was thinking, you know, the Jews had cornerstone rhythms that were just part of their culture to remember the works of God. And I was like, okay, do we have any cornerstone rhythms that point us back to God? And obviously we have Christmas, which we just celebrate. And we just talked about last episode of Christmas as time to remember that Jesus came to earth as a baby. We also have Easter, which is when Jesus died on the cross for our sins. Well, Good Friday, and then he rose again, conquering sin and death. So we have these two cornerstone events in our church Christian liturgical calendar that points us to the goodness of God. But generally speaking, Protestants, like, that's all we got.
Right.
Like, that's it. Like, we just lean into those two different things.
Yep.
But what I think is really fascinating is when you start looking at liturgical style churches, I'm thinking the Lutherans, Episcopalians, Catholics have this, Eastern Orthodox, they have different celebrations and feasts. I mean, a lot of times I think it's interesting that they do the feast after certain, like, saints.
You talk about that Southern Baptist potluck? That ain't a cornerstone?
I mean,
just sorry. Go ahead.
It's a cornerstone event, but I don't think it points to the goodness of God. I think it points us to, you know, Thanksgiving. But Thanksgiving should also be.
Yeah,
I didn't even write that one down.
See?
I think about the cornerstoneism is Thanksgiving. So, like, in the Protestant world, we generally have three things that should point us to God.
The new year.
The new year, a new restart.
See,
so we should have
us.
these things. But I think it's actually kind of interesting to think about, are there other rhythms that we can put into our lives that just help us keep our mind and focus on God, like such as like our own retreats. Like, do we take our own personal retreats? Like, not like disappear for 2 weeks and then just come back and yay. But like, I've heard of pastors who like, I knew one pastor who, well, actually I still know him, where once a year, I think is what he does, or like once every 6 months for like an entire day and an overnight, he actually goes to a monastery.
Interesting.
And so it's just so he can read and he can pray, because it's supposed to be, those are sacred places for visitors. Like I remember a few years ago, I went to a Mennonite retreat center where I was not allowed to talk to anybody for like 40, it was at least, it was like 36 hours.
Let's get
like
real. How hard was that for you, Mark?
It was both hard and freeing, because the way they the way they described it was, we're going to give the gift of silence to people, because the idea is the fact that we're all weary travelers who need time to just refresh and regroup, being surrounded by other people,
right.
The warmth of the other bodies, but not feeling like, oh, I got to put on a front, or I got to do these different things. And so I thought that was a really fascinating experience that I was able to do, and I would love to do that again. But I do think as Protestants, and as Christians and as followers of Jesus, we shouldn't be scared to have these rhythms in our life and intentionally use Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, the weekly church services to keep our mind focused on Jesus.
I agree with that. We should have these rhythms, right? But again, there is a difference, right? So again, Protestants were scared that they didn't want things to just get to the point where they didn't mean anything, right? Which is why they took it the complete opposite direction, which we shouldn't have done. That these traditions can be used, right, to help us refocus, but we have to make sure they help us refocus, and we're not just doing it, and it's not empty, vain words like the Pharisees and Sadducees used to do, right? Because that's where it's like, well, then it's meaningless. So I think for the Jewish people, these things actually do indeed mean things to them, right? And they're not forgetting. I mean, they're still looking for their Messiah to come, even though he's already came and they rejected him. He will come again, and they will know it's him. And so, but they're still looking for him to return. So that's why they do these things. It's a reminder of the things that he's done for them to keep them in tune and on track with God. And I think we should do these similar things to keep us in tune with God's Spirit and keep us on track with God. Well, this is why, to me, communion is a huge thing, right? It's not just some frivolous thing that we do every once in a while.
Like here's a wafer, here's some juice.
Yeah, okay, so just do it. No, to me, it should be a huge time of reflection of just like, oh my goodness, God, this is what you've done for me. And oh man, like to me, the very first thing I do is whenever I know we're going to be taking the Lord's Supper, I just start thinking of all the bad things I've done and how unworthy I am. And I just start crying out in repentance, basically, about how sorry I am that I am not who I want to be, who I need to be. Not that I can change my heart. It's all God that takes my heart and changes it by renewing my mind, by having a relationship with him. But those those moments, right? It points me back. It points me back. It's not empty. But I think it can be, right? It can be for some Christians, and I think that's where Protestants kind of steal away.
Right. And like, I mean, church, like, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, you just have to go, and then you show up and you do your thing, and then you go back home without the intentionality behind it. This is what I get to do. Like, I mean, even this past Sunday, dude, like Sunday morning, I woke up and I'm like, I
don't feel like going.
I rarely have this thought, but I had the thought of like, if we didn't go today, I'd be all right. Like, I'd be cool. But it ended up being a really encouraging Sunday,
I'll admit, I've had those thoughts a lot, and typically those are the days that I get the most out of the message.
And that's been the last 2 weeks. Like, exactly. It's been the last couple weeks. But I do think there's something to be said. And this is where I want to keep the rhythm and focus in my mind, is the fact of Christmas and Easter and Thanksgiving are cultural holidays now.
Sure.
They're not designed to focus you on Jesus anymore.
Right.
They're designed to enjoy time with family and friends and frivolity and have fun.
But
and
that's why we should.
And we should lean into it.
Right.
But I also do know, and this is a shortcoming of mine, is it's exhausting sometimes to constantly have to bring up and have these conversations, because it's like, I'd rather just sit and take a nap.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? But, but if we intentionally think, okay, so each one of these seasons is supposed to point us back, which we talked about a lot this past, I would say last month of the podcast of, Advent is supposed to help us look back, but also look forward.
Right.
Easter's a looking back, but also looking forward when we'll rise again. Thanksgiving is a time where we thank God for what we have and what he's done, and then also what he will do. And a weekly worship reminder is supposed to the fact of until Jesus comes, to reminder that he will come back.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. It's a time to worship him and to uplift each other and yeah, it's a good time.
And so for these seasons, I intentionally want to put those rhythms in my life of not just do them because they're cultural, but intentionally be like, what am I going to do for my family to point us towards this? With the Advent season, with Easter, and that's why, like, Christmas Eve Mass, I mean, even though I'm not Catholic, I am very much Protestant, Christmas Mass actually means something to me because that's for me. It's not for my family. It's not for my kids. Everyone's already asleep. I get to go. And it's also Protestants really don't do midnight services anymore either. So, but I go with my brother-in-law and we have some really good conversations. Just remember, like, Jesus is here, man.
Right.
Like, let's go.
Yeah, and I think that we should rename this, and it's just not the rhythms of life, but the intentional rhythms of life. Because we can get into a rhythm, right? I get into a rhythm. I wake up at 3:30. I leave by 4:30 to go to work. I come home. I eat dinner. I do my chores. That's the rhythm, right? But that rhythm doesn't mean anything. You're just going through the motions. But intentional rhythm.
But that rhythm also sustains you till tomorrow because you have to get enough sleep and then you eat to go to the
But
next
it's a
thing,
rhythm that without intentionality, right? It's a rhythm. It's a rhythm I have to do, right? That's why we have
not choose to do.
That's why we have weekends, right? We don't have if everybody intentionally always wanted to work, we'd always work. But we don't. We have weekends because we don't always want to work, right? It's a rhythm. But if we have an intentional rhythm, right? So it's not just Christmas, it's not just Easter, it's not just Thanksgiving, it's not just New Year's. It's, hey, I'm intentionally thinking about Christ in these aspects. And in these aspects, if I get the opportunity to share them with family or friends who I'm meeting with in these holidays, these national holidays that we in the States have, I'm going to take those opportunities. I'm not going to shy away from those opportunities. I'm going to use what RTC taught me a few months ago or a month ago about how to talk to unbelievers. I'm going to intentionally use that. I'm going to go back and listen to that so I know exactly what I need to do to talk to those unbelievers. And so I like the intentionality part of the rhythm. It's more than just a rhythm. You got to be intentional with your rhythm.
And, and go back to what the Jews did. Like, they had these rhythms in their calendar to a forced stop of remembrance, which we have those, but we also have to choose to make daily rhythms in our life too.
Yeah.
And so I jotted down a couple different ideas that I had for what are some daily rhythms that we could do where it's not necessarily, I'm going to do a checklist. It becomes a rhythm, and so some of the daily rhythms that I wrote down that we should be having in our lives is daily thinking of the works of the Lord. Like thinking, this is what God has done for me. Like I should wake up every morning and not go, you know how freaking hard it is to feed 7 kids that are barking at you before you even have decided to wake up, that they all want different breakfasts. And
wake up earlier. Just kidding.
But it's like, rather than like begrudgingly kicking my feet, being like, man, I love my kids, but right now I don't like you very much. Like, like rather than doing that, but like, thank you God that I was able to have a podcast and meet Beth to be able to have these kids that they now call me dad. Like, whoa.
Right.
That's super cool.
Sure.
But those things about the works of the Lord. Another daily rhythm would be is teaching the works of our Lord to our friends and to our children. Like anytime we have the opportunity, use those as teaching moments. And this is the thing that I want us to remember because, and I know there's a lot of people who have asked us questions about this. Like for you and me, Phil, like, we do study, we do teach. This is a very common thing for us to do. So when a kid asks me a question about anything with theology,
we're ready.
I'm ready to rock and roll, baby. Right. Let's just go. But I know a lot of people say like, I just don't know enough. How am I supposed to teach these different things?
Right.
But the kid doesn't need to be taught theology. They just need to be taught to focus on Jesus and what God has done.
Sure.
And there's resources that you can do. Like Courtney had, Cross-Form Kids with catechism, flashcards, and theology. What is it? ABC Theology or Theology Kids.
Yeah. There's a lot
of different resources people can do. Catechism books.
New Day Catechism. Is it New Day or New City? New City Catechism maybe is what it's called. It's a curriculum. You can actually get the app online. I have the app on my phone. It's another resource.
And there's there's Instagram accounts you can follow, like Coe or Felicia Masonheimer or Catechesis books. I follow them because it's really, really cool stuff. But there's ways that you can at least have simple conversations with your kids to just remind them, because every time you see in the Old Testament would say, hey, you're going to tell your kids this, and it was tell the kids, remind them of the work that the Lord has done, to remember what God has done.
Sure.
And anyone can teach that. You don't need a theology degree or a Bible degree to do any of that or be a pastor. Us as parents are called to do that for our own kids, but also for those in our relationship as well. So when we have opportunities, do we point back to God and say, you know what, I'm not sure where you are with faith, but I firmly believe that God's the one who got me through that.
Yeah, sure.
And so are we taking those opportunities to talk about God with our friends and with our family? Another one that I was thinking about, specifically coming out of the Psalms, is meditating on the word of the Lord. And how are you going to know the word of the Lord unless you're in the word of the Lord? Which your boy's looking at a mirror right now going, you're full of crap saying that people need to do this because I'm terrible at doing this too.
Well, just got to get better at it, right?
You know, and it's not a checklist, but it's meditating on it. And it's, you know, and that's why I have, you know, a daily Bible verse that pops up on my phone, my notifications. Because I check every notification, and if it's a Bible verse, I can read it. And so even if that's all I get, I'm at least able to keep my mind focused every single day on, yeah, here's what the scripture of the day is.
Right.
Another one that we can do is just what we call learning from the Lord. And we learn from the Lord by reading his word and having conversations with people, being in small groups, talking with your spouse and with your friends about, hey, you know, that's what we learned about in church today. Like, what do you think we should do about this? But constantly just learning from the Lord, but then also depending on the Lord. You know, I think about like the conversations we've had here on the podcast about prayer, about like George Mueller and always praying for that, the prayer life of Billy Graham, the prayer life of Jim Elliott. All these guys literally walked around every single day saying, God, I can't do this without you, so I'm going to need you.
Right.
And so, you know, and then there's also just not rhythms that we can have, but there's also, I think we can put in physical reminders to physically, because sometimes we need to have physical reminders of what God has done in our life. And I did not jot any stuff down because I figured this would be an interesting discussion question to kind of start to land the plane a little bit. But what physical reminders do you have in your life that you can remember the work of the Lord from? And I think this could be a really fun discussion question to have inside of the RTC Facebook group of what physical reminders do you put in your life to remember the works of the Lord. But I think it'd be kind of a fun way for us to end this episode and just go, what are physical reminders that we place in our lives to remember the works of the Lord?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things, and it pretty much all hits your daily rhythms of, you know, thinking of the works of the Lord. Well, how do you think of the works? How do you meditate upon the word? How do you learn from the Lord? And how do you depend on the Lord? You know, a lot of that is scripture reading. I listen to podcasts, those discussions I have with people, and preparing for episodes on our podcast, right? Because that forces us to get in the word. It forces us to get into that mindset of being intentional because we're going to do a teaching, right? And so, you know, I got that for my Wednesday night group, for Friday nights, for when we podcast. You got Sundays where you're intentionally in the Word, studying Scripture, and then throughout the week, right? I have encounters with people all the time. That's also where we can start teaching the works of the Lord to our friends and family and our children. So these are some easy daily reminders for me, right? It's a daily thing. But I've got notifications, like you said, of Scripture devotionals that pop up daily on my phone. Podcasts, certain podcasts.
You also have a lot of scripture on your wall, like upstairs in the kitchen, man.
Everywhere. But yeah, I mean, it just, you know, the biggest thing that helps me, it's a huge physical reminder, is my kids. Because I look at my kids and I'm like, I want them to know Jesus. Well, what's one way they can know Jesus? By me acting like Jesus, right? I gotta imitate Christ, right? And so, you know, that, how do you learn how to imitate Christ? Well, you got to be in His Word. You got to think about His ways. You got to study. You got to pray. Prayer is the big thing, right? Because again, like we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, I can look and read the Word and it can mean nothing. But when I pray, when I add prayer into it, and this is why prayer is so important. When you add prayer into it, it's like, I don't know, your mind starts really focusing more than just the words on a page. You're focusing and you're being intentional in your relationship with Christ, which opens up your mind and your heart to the Scripture when you read it. That's just the way I feel about it. So.
That's cool. So I actually have some physical reminders that I have to remember the works of God. One is actually my tattoo. Like unapologetically, that's what it's there for, is to remind myself and have conversations around it, because it's the Cairo. It's basically the OG monogram of Jesus Christ. And it says that Jesus is the Alpha and the Omega. And it's a reminder to me every single day of He's the first and the last. And I follow Him as Lord. And another thing I keep it on my desk, actually. Some Protestants might get a little upset at this, but my brother-in-law, Joe, when him and Amanda went on their honeymoon, they toured Europe and all these different things. Well, they ended up going to the Vatican. And he was like, hey, is there anything you want me to bring back from the Vatican? I'm like, dude, a rosary would be really cool. It'd be really cool to have one from the Vatican. And not because of the Pope, just because of it is what it is. And so I actually have a rosary that sits on my desk every single day. And I don't pray the rosary. I don't use this as I have to do like all these thousands of different, well, more like dozens of different prayers. But I seriously see it every single day while I work because it sits next to my mouse. And so anytime I touch my mouse, I see my rosary. And lately what I've been trying to do is at least once a day is pick up my rosary and just pray the Lord's Prayer. That's what I've been trying to do for about the last week. And consistently, not even thinking about this episode, just trying to do it because the Bible says, like, when you pray to your Father in heaven, pray in this way. And I'm like, man, if we're just getting started with baby steps, nothing's better than the Lord's Prayer. Because it's literally Jesus said, pray like this. Our Father who is in heaven, hallowed be your name.
But just so our listeners understand that you're not saying the rosary, the only reason why you do it, you have to pick up the rosary in order to do it. What you're saying is it's just a reminder. It's just a reminder for you to do that.
Yep. It's the same as the 12 stones. When they see that, talk about it when you see it.
Whether you pick it up, whether it stays on your desk, whether it's even there, it doesn't mean anything. The rosary itself does not mean anything other than it's a reminder for you. It's the way you choose to be reminded.
And I'm not saying anyone else should do it. I'm not saying anyone else, because the rosary for a lot of people is simply just a good luck charm. To be honest with you, like there's a lot of people who have rosaries, or even they wear cross necklaces.
Sure.
And because it's like it's a fashion piece, or it's a remembrance of I don't know, it's a good luck charm. It's like Christian roots. It's kind of a cool vibe, whatever, or based on what culture you come out of, it's just part of the culture. But I do know, like, the original purpose of the rosary when it was first created was to help monks and priests and followers of Christians just remember to pray.
Right.
And there's definitely prayers of the rosary that I disagree with, but I do think it's not a bad thing to put in these physical reminders to do that. And, I was thinking back just now of the different things I used to do with my teenagers, like once a quarter, I would do what we would call worship experiences, because I would get your whole body to experience worship. So we would worship in song, we'd worship in prayer, we would read, we would do prayer walks, we would light candles, we would do different things. Because my idea is we're going to try to engage your entire body with worshiping God. There's just maybe you can connect with a certain way to worship God. And there's nothing special about it. There's nothing magical about it.
Right.
It was just a different rhythm to try to put into the denomination schedule.
Yeah, I would just say encourage people not to make it meaningless, right?
No, don't just do ritual. I mean, the Bible says don't pray in vain words.
Well, and don't let something become an idol where, like, okay, well, this has meaning because it's from the Vatican, which I know that's not what you're saying at all. But I just want to make sure that listeners understand that you're not doing it, because I can hear people, Protestants, right? And it's going, I can't believe he's using a rosary. I can't believe he's got one of those. And it's like, no, wait, hang on.
That's what I grew up believing.
Right. So I'm just saying that this is not what you're saying. You're not saying you have to have this. You're not making it an idol in your life. Nope. Because people have crosses or pictures of Jesus' resemblance in their house, all the time.
Pictures are a little weird.
Even Protestants, right? My parents, when they first became Christians, had a picture of Jesus. I remember it's an old wooden frame of blonde hair, blue-eyed Jesus. But I go to a Protestant's house where there's crosses and everything like that. And it's like there's to me, there's no difference between that and the rosary, right? And the way you're using it. Mm-hmm. Now,
it's a physical remember to remember to keep my eyes on Jesus.
And I just want to make sure that everybody that's listening understands that that's where you're at, right? Mm-hmm. It's just a physical reminder.
It's a rhythm I'm trying to put in, and the rhythm isn't like the rosary. The rhythm isn't getting tattoos. The rhythm isn't I have to go to this place to pray. But it's more of just trying to put in these daily reminders and physical reminders to have the daily rhythms and to have the other rhythms.
Nor are you saying that other people have to do that. That's just something that you've done to help you.
Yeah, right? And I think this is a fair question to kind of end the show, is maybe asking our podcast listeners, if we're going to try to focus on rhythms, and maybe, I don't know how we can do this with the podcast to try to help people keep rhythms in their life too, but, we already have rhythms in our life and our culture with what we've already talked about. How can you use those rhythms to point yourself and your family to Jesus? Mm-hmm. Another one is what daily rhythms can you put inside of your own life to just remember the works of God and what he has done? Mm-hmm. And is there a physical reminder that you can do to just, because we get distracted, man. I think that's part of what Shabbat was. And I think that's what the 12 stones was. We get very, very distracted, but there's supposed to be like physical guide marks to point us back to Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Right, just like Advent, and we've had all these conversations for the past month about this type of stuff.
Yeah, so that's the question, is just what rhythms are you going to put in your own life to help keep you focused on Jesus in 2023? So I know this was a little bit different kind of an episode, rather than just, looking back and looking forward, but like, what rhythms are we going to do in 2023 to keep our eyes and minds focused on Jesus? Yeah. Anything else you got to end the show, my dude, or is that a good place to end it?
I think that's it, man. I think hit the button.
Well, I'll hit the button.
Time for Fun Facts with Filler.
Well, so speaking of all the fun Catholic things that I brought another Catholic fun
Say,
fact.
if people are listening and watching the show, we're wearing like straight up Notre Dame, top down. Talk about rosaries.
So, yeah.
People are probably very confused.
I'm not.
Befuddled.
I am in no way Catholic, although I do
I'm
like.
ordained by the Southern Baptist Convention, so
I
let's put it
do.
there.
I do enjoy a lot of.
I enjoy a lot
Catholic
of I enjoy a lot of tradition and liturgy.
Yeah, I just do. Anyways, I don't think they. I mean, yeah. Anyways, that's a different conversation. So in light of all the Catholic talk, I've got a Catholic fun fact
Regarding New
which
Year's?
you probably know, and I know, but maybe somebody doesn't know. Did you know you can thank the Pope for making our New Year's start on January 1st? The Gregorian calendar was introduced in October of 1582 by Pope Gregory the 13th. Wow. Pope Gregory the 13th. My Roman noodle.
Roman noodle. Your Roman noodles.
My Roman numeral.
Ramen sounds really yummy right now.
Reading is a little bad. So Pope Gregory the 13th as a revised version of the Julian calendar. It took almost 350 years for the world to get on board. Turkey didn't make the switch until 1927.
Wait, so after World War I?
Yeah, before they made the switch over to the Gregorian calendar. Yep.
That's why. I wonder if there's a little bit of, because, Turkey, Constantinople, Eastern Orthodox. I wonder if there was a little bit of like a little
hairiness going on there.
I wonder if there's a little hairiness to it.
Be like, we were the first church, bro.
But like, who on earth would be like, everyone else? Well, actually, I can't say it because America's that way with
the metric
heights
system.
and speed and everything.
Yeah.
So I can't make fun of Turkey because America's the exact same.
We use
with everything else.
We use SAE standards, so
all that kind of fun stuff. Yeah. But either way, guys, we hope that you guys have been enjoying hanging out with us for all of 2022. If you're new to the podcast, make sure you subscribe on anywhere you listen to, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Make sure you get involved with the Facebook group, with the Instagram, with YouTube, all the various different places. There's so many ways for you to get connected with the RTC community. And if you've been a part of the RTC community for a very, very long time, we would love to connect with you offline as well in the Facebook group, on Facebook, Instagram, via email, text, whatever way you want to reach out to us.
And don't forget to go to the YouTube channel, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you can know when we're on. Ding! Also, don't forget to check out Revive Fest. If you want to come and hang out with your boys and make it an RTC family party, go to revivefest.com.
Which when is tickets. Revive Fest?
It's July 21st through the 23rd, I believe.
Wow, you got that day down.
Well, I follow it. So
in July, we're going to be chilling in Southwest Michigan. Hopefully, we will see you guys there too. So we hope you guys had a great holiday season. We hope you enjoy bringing the new year with your family. Come back 2023. We ain't slowing down. We have a lot of more fun conversations coming your way, including what we're going to be talking about next week. First episode of 2023 is, does pain, evil, and suffering disprove the existence of God? It's going to be a good one, buddy. You ready?
Yeah. Happy New Year.
All right, guys. We'll see you in 2023. So until then,
take it easy.